What's next for a neighborhood under siege? We'll have to wait and see. Reporting live, Sadie Sinclair, Channel 7 News.
We've got Greco-Roman antiquities. We've got the hyperpop artist Grimes, better known as Elon Musk's ex and arch nemesis of Azealia Banks. You also have $200 per month magazine subscriptions that get you entry to soirees, little salons where you can rub elbows with other people who, like you, idolize people like Peter Thiel. All of these comprise the aesthetic of the new Right-Wing Tech Intelligentsia, as Jimmy Woo, a writer for Bay Area Current, describes them in a new piece called Meet the New Right-Wing Tech Intelligentsia. A few different friends sent me this piece, and I'm glad that they did, because I think it really captures the look and the feel of the people who are trying to rule the world. Jimmy specifically looks at a few different media outlets that have been born over the past few years and are funded by some of the richest people among us in order to create more of a culture that can support the sort of like right-wing techno-libertarian future that the Thiels of the world hope for us. Bay Area Current is a mostly volunteer-run publication, new out of East Bay. Jimmy and I were talking after we finished recording about the other jobs that we have in order to subsidize the journalism work that we do. Jimmy does repair work on brass instruments, and like Bay Area Current, we get no Thiel money here at San Francisco. If you believe that it's important that this content gets out to more people, all of the podcasts are not paywalled. You get podcasts a little bit early though if you subscribe to the Patreon at patreon.com/San Francisco. Thank you so much to Jeremy, Christian, and Alan, who recently signed up at patreon.com/San Francisco. Please join them over there in supporting this small attempt to push back against the Peter Thiels of the world. So you previously worked in tech. Can you say what your job was and what the signs were that it was time to leave the industry?
Yeah, the signs were there from the beginning, to be honest. Well, I mean, I have degrees in computer science, and so I felt like I spent a lot of my life, training to be someone who was going to work in tech, either in academia or in industry. I loved computer science, but almost from the moment I started my first tech job, coming out of grad school, and I was a machine learning engineer at a couple of companies, big and small. Almost from the get-go, I developed really bad mental health issues, and I think I disliked it from at just about every level.
Yeah.
Like I hated the day-to-day, just like work, just like being a worker, just like working stuff, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
I hated like what the tech industry is just doing to society generally. Of course, I think I had started to come to some political consciousness sort of a little bit before I started working, but going to work further accelerated that transformation for me personally. I also really didn't think that work as a machine learning engineer or as a software engineer was nearly as intellectually stimulating as I thought computer science was when I was a student. So, but it was really it was all those things, and it was the mental health was just in shambles, and that really sealed the deal. And I was desperate for a way out for years, but I somehow slogged through it for years until and was in and out of jobs in tech, and hopefully I've left tech for the last time, but you never know in this economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's tempting if you can find a job. Even tech has been affected, obviously, by the rise in unemployment recently. When you're talking about some of the mental health struggles that you had, I assume a lot of that had to do with the hours? Was it also like the, I don't know, the hierarchies and like just the environment of the office that you weren't feeling?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch of factors. It's looking back. I mean, I've been through like a lot of therapy and stuff, try to dissect this, and I think it's actually quite complicated for me. But I think part of it was the hours, depending on the workplace. But a lot of it was sort of yeah, workplace hierarchy, and there was a lot of. I had my main issue was anxiety.
Yeah.
I think I disliked, yeah, just workplaces, and also the fact that working as a software engineer involved using a lot of tools and processes that were really unstructured and really vague and open ended, and unsatisfying in a way that I wasn't used to from being. I mean, I was pretty good in school, but I was not used to working in the way that and under the pressures that they have
Yeah.
in industry.
Yeah, I feel like everybody who lives in San Francisco probably has like, I mean, interacted with people who are working in that environment, sees how it can be stressful, it can be anxiety causing. My dad was an engineer for many years at initially down in Southern California, and then Intel built like this big hub in Folsom, California. Feels like a random place. I think it was cheap real estate, and they built this like hive where like you didn't actually ever have to leave the office building the entire day, because you know you have your cafeteria there, you have like skyways that were, or like walkways connecting the buildings, so you actually never have to interact with the outside world really. It felt very kind of all-consuming.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's why they call them, like a lot of tech companies call they call them campuses, right?
Right.
They're like
Right.
they're basically they're like aspiring to be little company towns, and
Totally.
the bigger the company is, the more it is like that. I feel like, especially if you're like the company's in a smaller place like Folsom, or even in cities in the South Bay, like they're very much like company towns. And I feel like as a worker, if you're not careful, you just like spend your whole life in that. Sometimes you can even like do your laundry there or whatever. You know,
Totally.
like it's very tempting, but it's like it's awful for you, I think.
Yeah. Are you familiar with 996?
Yeah.
This is like something that I recently learned about that is being maybe imported from China, as I understand.
Yeah.
The idea that people are working from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. And I mean, I know that it's that kind of the assemblage of those numbers is newer, but that's a work ethic that I think has existed in Silicon Valley for a minute. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is interesting that, like, with the Chinese century or whatever you want to call it, and
Yeah.
like that this idea is being imported. But I think you're totally right that like busting your ass at a startup to make less than you would at a big company, and being proud of it for some reason for working so
The
hard for your
grind,
bosses,
yeah, the hustle.
has been there for a long time. They're just like given it a new name.
Totally. I also feel like it makes sense that we're importing it from China as well. Just it like the growing up, I'm half Asian, and there is definitely work ethic that is presumed growing up, that you're going to put in a lot of time. I hope that the Asian kids of today, like Gen Alpha, like have a little bit more of a relaxed view of work, given that the world that they're inheriting feels a lot bleaker than when I was growing up in the 90s. But in any case, okay, so, early on you saw signs, and now you have pivoted into a very different line of work, where I found you. A bunch of my friends have been talking about this piece that you wrote at Bay Area Current, and it's called "Meet the New Right-Wing Tech Intelligentsia." first, would you kind of intro what Bay Area Current is?
Sure, yeah. So Bay Area Current is a quite a new publication. We launched in June this year. So just this summer. And we are a publication of work for working class news and opinion. The topics run the gamut from politics, tech, culture, labor and tenant struggles. So we're a publication where we don't have a business section; we have a labor section.
Yeah.
We have very experienced journalists writing for us sometimes, and on our editorial team. But we also have just like ordinary people and like people writing about the struggles that they have themselves encountered and participated in, like labor and tenant organizers themselves will write, and they may not be experienced writers per se, but as editors we'll help them with that aspect of it. But we want sort of authentic working class voice, perspective, and issues that affect working people. We're interpreting working class very broadly here, like not just people who work, but all who are dispossessed.
Right on.
In society.
Right on. And yeah, I mean, it is. I appreciate that you called out the fact that you have like the labor section versus the business section. I don't know if many people know this, but I learned from my friend Deej a while back. Hey Deej, like newspapers in the olden days, like a labor section was fairly common. Like, and then like in I guess it was probably like the 70s ish. The business sections, real estate sections became popularized as newspapers, I guess, became less about informing the public and more about responding to the needs of their clients, which one would think would be the subscribers, but in many cases were the advertisers. I also heard a stat the other day that since 2005, journalism has lost half of its workers. So the last 20 years, the fleet of journalists out there has been halved. So I'm always stoked to hear about new publications that are coming up, especially ones that are modeled around the interests of the readers in mind and the working class.
I mean, that's both a shocking figure to hear about, but also I don't consider myself a professional journalist yet, at least. But everyone I have talked to about it's getting laid off has been a rite of passage. It's just
yeah, been there. Definitely had my layoffs in the media industry before. So let's talk about the piece that will be linked in the show notes. Everybody should go read it. And the piece is talking about the kind of the aesthetics in part of the world surrounding tech elites, their boosters, the media, and the atmosphere of the media that's going on in Silicon Valley right now. And I feel like it really efficiently describes all of the above. Maybe we could talk about some of the characters that come up in this work of nonfiction.
Sure, yeah, they're fun characters.
Yeah, I mean, so you can't really talk about power and tech in 2025 or 2026 without saying the name Peter Thiel, who comes up a few times in the piece. Could you? I would love to speak a little bit about something we haven't talked about on the podcast, which is Thiel's investment in right-wing cultural production. I remember learning about a few years ago about how he funds this podcast Red Scare, which is kind of this edgelordy, dime square New York City. Two girls, one of them used to identify as DSA, and it's now like a right-wing pipeline, like an alt-right pipeline podcast, bringing people into the movement through creating a culture around this podcast. I also remember living in the Mission when Peter Thiel launched a startup called Yas, which was very short-lived. It was when everyone was launching like WeWorks for different niches. Like there was like the Wing, which was like the women's WeWork. Thiel launched Yas, which was like the queer WeWork. And they used to occupy a house in the Mission around, I'm gonna say like Valencia 19th. But all of that said, could we talk for a minute, or I'd love to hear your thoughts about the huge breadth of the cultural products that Thiel has been involved in.
Yeah, so I still don't consider myself like an expert on the Thiel cinematic universe, but when I was doing my research, my backgrounds for the piece, it was just stunning how many times his name popped up, like just how many jars he's had his hands in. So for the purposes of this piece I wrote, he is widely believed. So the piece is a survey of this landscape of essentially print magazines in and about tech, especially ones that are based in the Bay Area. And some of the more right-wing ones have affiliations with Thiel. So this one that we could talk a bit more about later, but one that I would say is far right, called Palladium Magazine, is widely rumored to be funded by Thiel. I have to say widely rumored because it's stated all over the internet that he funded them, but his team did not respond to a request for comments and wasn't able to find his name in their tax records. But Palladium Magazine's tax records indicate millions of dollars in donations, unnamed donations, over the past couple of years. That doesn't seem like it seems like it would have to be bankrolled by somebody quite powerful.
Right.
So there's that, and then there's another magazine that appears in the piece called Arena Magazine, which I don't have any evidence that they're directly funded by Thiel, but they're definitely in that broader universe where they're affiliated with people from a so-called patriotic venture capital firm called 8VC, headed by Joe Lonsdale, who is a Thiel protege, and co-founded Palantir with Peter Thiel. So they're very much, so some of these magazines and publications are really in the Thiel sphere. But other than that, I mean, I've heard of like Dime Square and Red Scare, but I'm not an expert on the broader. Like, could you say more about? And I also didn't know about Yas.
Yeah,
what Thiel has been up to.
Yeah, I mean, I think he, like, if you can't deny that Peter Thiel is working hard to sort of build more than just these startups. He is building the like cultural infrastructure to keep them going, trying to make like it's not even like libertarianism, but it's some of the ways he works, it feels like anarcho-capitalism. At the same time, Palantir has these huge government contracts. It wouldn't exist if not for sucking on the teat of like the government. Like it is subsidized by our tax dollars. And I think like in order to keep that going, it behooves Peter Thiel to also have podcasts, to also have magazines, to have websites, like a culture, like a media culture around the world that he's trying to create. It even includes things like churches. Like
Act 17, is that what you're referring
Yes.
to? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you know about them?
I don't know much about them, but I came across them as well.
Yeah, I mean, Peter Thiel, right by Dolores Park, Garry Tan, another Thiel protege that people who listen to the podcast will know. Garry Tan owns like what used to be a church on Dolores, right across from Dolores Park, and Peter Thiel has spoken there about his desire to like sort of meld Christianity with tech, and it's caught on, or at least, I say caught on. I mean, I do think a lot of what he's doing is he's funding these cultural products that wouldn't have the strongholds on our culture that they have today without him throwing millions and millions of dollars at them. I don't think it's as organic as it might look. Yeah, with the Christianity aspect, I mean, he is envisioning, he and a lot of like Lonsdales of the world, Joe Lonsdales of the world, are looking at AI and looking at it as a kind of like religious object, or a religious a way to get closer to God. And I think it's an interesting way to pull people in who like, you talked about going to work and feeling like anxiety, and going to work and not you immediately being turned off by the work environment. And so I think what Thiel is trying to do is trying to create an atmosphere that people want to come back to, so that his dreams of a very politically right-wing, culturally right-wing future, he's hoping if he throws enough money at it, then maybe eventually organically it does take. In cases like Yas was gone shortly after it started, so not everything is going to work, but that's kind of like the startup world thing, is like you throw a bunch of money at a bunch of ideas, you don't know which ones are going to take, but if you keep throwing money at it, inevitably there will be things like Act 17, where it seems like they do have some organic buy-in from people who aren't strictly interested in sucking up to Peter Thiel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. I just remember they also somewhat recently delivered this series of bizarre lectures on the Antichrist.
Yes.
So there's something about this connection he's trying to forge between like tech and sort of like full-throated defense of tech via Christianity.
Yeah.
That I don't fully understand, but people are watching.
Yeah. I mean, he did a series, like a 4-part series at the Commonwealth Club along the Embarcadero a couple of months back, talking about the Antichrist, positing that Greta Thunberg represents the modern Antichrist, in part because she's getting in between us and our AGI, a future where humans are kind of subordinate to AI. And it was interesting. Like, I went out on one of the nights and like talked to people who were waiting in line, and just the kind of like excitement, he was clearly building a culture that I was completely disgusted by, but somehow it has buy-in. So in the piece, you introduce some other characters in tech media. Another part of building a culture around tech is, not just funding Yas, but also, media. Some people will recognize these characters from just living around San Francisco, because in many ways they're I see them a bit as archetypes, and I wanted to know if you would speak about a couple in particular. One is named Jonah Bennett.
Sure. Yeah. So Jonah Bennett is one of the editors of Palladium magazine, the very likely teal-funded Palladium magazine that I mentioned earlier. I guess I'll talk about the bunch of them together because they're kind of interesting collectively. Jonah Bennett and Wolf Tivey, I think, are the two founding editors, and Samuel Beria is one of the current editors, maybe editor-in-chief right now. Jonah Bennett might have sort of like retreated into private life or something. But in any case, these three guys are some of the main characters in affiliated with Palladium magazine.
Taibbi, is that Matt Taibbi relation at all?
Wolf Tivey, I'm not sure.
Oh, okay.
T-I-B,
right.
no relation to Matt Taibbi. That would be fascinating.
Yeah.
But no, I don't. No, there's no relation. But these three editors come from the world of the Dark Enlightenment, or the neo-reactionary movement, sometimes abbreviated NRX. Possibly listeners of this pod will be familiar with, or have heard of, Curtis Yarvin. So Curtis Yarvin is this like far-right guru, pseudo philosopher guy who has the ear of J.D. Vance and others in the Trumposphere, and he's a former software developer and blogger, and he's kind of the intellectual figurehead of neo-reaction, and people like Curtis Yarvin and others in the neo-reactionary movement or Dark Enlightenment talk a lot about monarchy, about bringing back the monarchy, about the United States should be ruled by a CEO dictator. They believe, a lot of them believe in so-called scientific racism,
eugenics, basically.
Just incredible breadth of extremely reactionary thought, and they're quite open about it. So in any case, these three editors of and probably some of the contributors to Palladium magazine, including Curtis Yarvin himself, was a contributor not too long ago to this magazine, come from that world. And they've written, some of them have written under pseudonyms in the past in neo-reactionary blogs. And it can be hard to dig them up. And they're quite evasive about it. But like when we asked for comments, they were quite evasive. But I see Palladium magazine as a sort of above ground publication, like, because some of these neo-reactionary blogs are now, like, they've been taken down. You can only find parts of them on Internet Archives, that kind of thing. So you really got to snoop to figure out where these people are from and the truly awful, unabashed things they've said in the past. But I think Palladium is an effort and is an attempt by them to launder these ideas into a more respectable, really glossy, like the magazine is literally like really beautiful and glossy in a sort of like futuro reactionary way. They have, like, Grimes did a nude photo shoot for them. Grimes is a regular attendee of Palladium
another
parties.
Icon within this kind of ecosphere.
So they have this, like, this publication now that looks really shiny and slick, but when you read it, if you read past the really long-winded, just really windbag articles about God knows what, sometimes you get a couple lines here and there where they're honest about what they believe,
right? And
those lines say things like they embrace a future world, like they embrace a future of eugenics. They embrace a future of, they think that in the future we're going to have a widespread human caste system. The piece that Curtis Yarvin wrote, he wrote that we should have an orbital authority stationed in outer space that rules with an iron military fist the entire planet. And this is, again, this is like not nearly as bad as some of the things that they have probably written under pseudonyms in the past in the sort of below ground neo-reactionary blogosphere. But this is Palladium magazine. This is the intellectual tradition that they come from, and if you read it a little bit, you can tell that this is really, really awful stuff.
Yeah. So Jonah Bennett, one of the editors, like, has a connection to Thiel in that he lived at this house in Oakland, Leverage Research. It was kind of like a I don't know, startup hype house, mentorship house. There's a lot of these in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to define, right?
Yeah.
And I would say it is / was. I think it kind of had a rebrand a couple of years ago, but it was this Leverage Research is / was this think tank or research organization, really a group house. Like they literally had a house by Lake Merritt in Oakland. After learning more about them and finding their address or their former address, I realized that I jog past that house all the time. I live in Oakland. So that was wild to realize. And group houses are totally a thing in the techie world, right? And so Leverage Research was, and I think still is, doing, I would call it like crackpot social science. Like Sam Oburia, Jonah Bennett and Sam Oburia have both worked at Leverage. And Leverage is for sure funded by Peter Thiel. We have the records on that. And so they were, like Sam Oburia, for example, who was the Palladium editor who I ran into in person at one point a few months ago, developed, while he was at Leverage, something he called great founder theory, which is like kind of a repackaged great man theory of history, but he specifically thinks that great men throughout history who are sort of like startup founder type figures are really the drivers of historical progress. So they're just like doing like crackpot pseudo social science there, but it had like this like cult-like element as well at Leverage Research, where like if you stepped out of line, this is allegedly according to past members who have written about it, written like blog posts about it. It's really fascinating. If you stepped out of line, you would have to have like a debugging session with a superior.
Oh my gosh.
It's just wild stuff. You could read more about it for those who have too much time on their hands.
Yeah, it's scary stuff happening, in close vicinity to where we are right now. One of the other people that is a bit of an archetype here, but is a different kind of character that you write about, was Jasmine Sun. You kind of type her as rightwardly mobile, and she seems to be like kind of an entryway into this alt-right pipeline. I know that is the most overused term of the past year, but tell me about like meeting Jasmine Sun.
Sure. So Jasmine is, I wouldn't go so far as to say she pushes people down a right-wing pipeline, but she's someone who has, I would say she has recently been a liberal enabler of this rightward slide in the tech landscape, the tech media landscape that I described in the article. So, but to give a more well-rounded picture here, Jasmine Sun is a writer, blogger, Substacker. She used to actually work at Substack. And she is one of the founders of Kernel magazine, which is one of the publications in this landscape that I talk about in the piece. Kernel magazine is, they're not a right-wing publication. I I would describe them on average as liberal, and they're really focused on tech. They do they write a lot of interesting and detailed pieces on how various technologies work and the interaction between tech and society. And I've met a lot of people from the Kernel magazine milieu over the past year or two, and I like some of them, to be honest. But their pieces sort of are really faithful to the worldview, the expert worldview of the technologist. I think they have a lot of wonder and awe at technology and what technologists can do and the plight of technologists, of techies, whether they're like tech workers or founders and investors. So I think that's the worldview that they're loyal to, and not necessarily to any political worldview. Like
Right.
Kernel, in their one of their opening pieces, describes himself as progressive techno-optimist. But I think because they're more enthralled by technology than they are loyal to any sort of emancipatory political project, in my view, I think this has this means that they're sort of allowing themselves to be on the spectrum of publications that is sliding rightwards. And I saw that, I think, in this series of events, these writer parties, these hangouts, these gatherings, soirees, whatever you want to call them, happy hours, that Jasmine hosted along with Clara Collier, editor of Asterisk magazine, which is a prominent magazine in the effective altruist and rationalist sphere. If people know about that whole can of worms, that whole world.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess we should probably define those for people. Just I know that a lot of people will be familiar with those terms, but some won't. Effective altruism. Do you want to try to define it?
Sure. I'll give a initial stab, but feel free to jump in. Effective altruism, if you like look them up on Wikipedia or something, it has a really vague definition where they're like, effective altruism is about doing the most good with limited resources or something, sort of like an altruistic economics, if you will. And it's a movement that was basically originally concerned with convincing wealthy and ultra wealthy people to make the most effective charitable donations with their money and try to donate, like to earn more money to give it away and things like that.
Sounds great. I mean, it sounds altruistic.
Like, yeah. It's like sort of like capitalistic, and individualistic, but at least well-meaning, right? It sounds like, that's like, okay, fine. Like, but they've become better. The effective altruist, or EA movement, has become more well-known in recent years for spending a lot of their money and effort thinking about AI and AGI, artificial general intelligence, and smarter than human intelligence. They're both sort of sometimes boosters for the AI industry, but at the same time, they worry a lot about AI becoming smarter than humans. But unlike some groups like Stop AI, who I recall that you had on this podcast before, they don't want to. Even when they think that we're going to have human extinction due to AGI, they don't want to stop AGI development.
Right.
They want to align it with human values, whatever that means, through technical means. So they're like a weird group. They've also gotten like bankrolled by Sam Bankman-Fried, the crypto fraudster. So just a fascinating world.
Yeah. Sam Bankman-Fried, who was interviewed by Manny Akudiel, friends of the podcast will know, a few months before he was arrested. He's now in prison for scamming people out of a bunch of crypto value. One of the other magazines that you explore that is, I mean, I can't think of like another word at the moment except for like depressing to know that this magazine exists and the magazine I'm speaking of is Arena magazine, and it seems to be like sort of unabashed militaristic nationalism in the form of a magazine. I know that kind of that vibe shift, as you term it, like I think it's so clear to someone who worked in media in the 2010s and even before. I remember writing about how I thought it was so fucked up that Raytheon and the CIA were sponsors at this annual conference, Lesbians Who Tech and Allies. And you know, like we've come so much further from that time feels quaint in that there was still kind of like a nod towards like, oh, we're trying to be inclusive. We're the CIA, but we're trying to be inclusive. You know, that's kind of been thrown to the side now, it feels like, and now we're just talking about warmongering.
Yeah.
So Arena magazine, what is it? Why does it exist?
Yeah, Arena magazine is fascinating. They're another right-wing magazine that I encountered at some of these events, like at Jasmine Sun's, Jasmine and Clara's writer parties, along with Palladium and others. So I think to situate Arena magazine, I think you're exactly right that we need to think about the 2010s and what it was like at that time. I mean, tech companies have always been doing awful things, but in the 2010s, it felt like they had some shame, or they could be shamed a little bit in public, at least. Starting around the mid 2010s was when the so-called tech clash was in force. Where
the Google bus protests, I remember, was a big part of it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, Google bus, like tech and gentrification, tech and militarism and machine learning. Like at that time, you're exactly right that if we discovered that Google or Amazon or whoever had a contract with the Pentagon, that was a huge scandal, and that was ammunition that was used by people in the tech workers movement, which I was a part of in the late 2010s. There was kind of, I think, a big part of the tech clash, and something that gave it teeth was this movement by tech workers to stand up to their bosses, sometimes over bread and butter issues, like pay and benefits and working conditions, like any other workers, but uniquely for tech, it was really strong on emphasizing the social ends of technology and what tech is actually being used for. So that was one of the strengths of the tech worker movement as part of the tech clash, and so they were really concerned with, whether when their employers were using technology for military ends or for mass surveillance and things like that. But that, like you said, looks quaint in retrospect. There's been this shift in, I think, both the vibe, in general politics, and that's reflected specifically in tech and in political economy, where you have the tech industry, especially in terms of the billionaire faces of the tech industry, have swung. I don't know what they thought privately. Maybe they're probably always right wing privately, but
potentially, yeah.
I mean, the billionaire's no billionaire, and now they have no shame.
Mask off, yeah.
Mask off moment. They support Trump. They want mass surveillance. They're all about. They're all on the anti-China train, and I think they're taking advantage of this moment of protectionism, interest in reindustrialization, in fear-mongering about China. They want to take advantage of that to attract investments from the military, from the government, in companies like Anduril, which was profiled glowingly in Arena magazine. They want to curry favor with the Trump regime and the government to stave off regulation, even mild regulation
Yeah.
that was threatened during previous administrations. So the lesson that I think they've learned from the techlash era is that they want to have broader influence. They want to have influence in DC, and they want to have influence in broader culture. Hence, the investment in these in publications and media projects.
Yeah. I mean, when a few moments that changed history in recent years, I think of Jeff Bezos buying the Washington Post as a way to make sure that the Washington Post, which is the newspaper that the most people in Capitol Hill are reading, would never say anything bad about Amazon. And I think also about Garry Tan, who after being like a big San Francisco booster and saying everybody in tech needs to move to San Francisco, I think it was last year, announced how he was moving to DC to open a startup hype house, Y Combinator, out there in DC, or spend more time at the one that existed actually. And then Y Combinator announced it was getting into the weapons business. And we're going to talk a little bit more about like the media, the atmosphere, the ecosphere that did not exist like 10 years ago. All of these magazines that we've been speaking of didn't exist 10 years ago. And let's talk about that time a bit. Like, I want to like kind of get to the bottom of like, has it always been kind of bad? And I would argue yes, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say. You write about the techlash, the backlash against these, big tech corporations in the 2010s with labor unions, and also we saw like the birth of some alternative media outlets that were critical of the tech industry, like Logic, or now Logic's magazine, which I've contributed to before. And it's very, I mean, like I'm happy that it exists. I feel like by and large, though, the tech media has been sort of a hype machine for tech corporations, even before this new slate of like, the Arenas and the Palladiums of the world.
I think that is true to a large extent, and you would know better than I do about this. I haven't been sort of like working in media or following media closely, for nearly as long as you have. I think that can be true, and yeah, I think mainstream tech publications, they get too easily excited about covering new technologies, and like these days, I think tech has, like we were talking about before, wanted to expand its reach. So kind of billionaire money funnels into projects with more or less explicitly the goal of protecting the interests of the tech industry and its worldview. We have, like, for example, everything that Peter Thiel has his hands in. Also some things going on, like Stripe Press, for example. Stripe is a ubiquitous payment processing company. I think they're still headquartered here in the city.
Yeah, I think so.
And they now run a publishing press. They publish books, and they seem, from a skim of their site, it seemed that the theme was roughly like abundance and progress studies. So like boosterism, basically, and the broader ideologies that would boost technology. So I think there has been more of a deliberate effort to funnel money into those kinds of efforts. But I think stuff going further back, you probably know better than I do in terms of like mainstream publications like Wired, Verge. I don't know, what were they like back
Yeah,
in the day?
I mean, I think of them as being like a more, I guess, centrist point of view, having a more centrist point of view versus like, I mean, Arena and just, military and nationalist boosterism. Uh, Wired was never that, but it would write pretty glowingly, and maybe Wired was more critical, but a lot of these publications like TechCrunch, I think of in particular, the journalists being like very excited to get their hands on the new iPhone model, and so never wanting to like say anything that was too negative about Apple products, because that might lead to them not being invited to the next iPhone unveiling.
Yeah.
That happens every year. I also think about like at TechCrunch specifically, like one of my early nemeses as I was like starting to write about news here in the Bay Area was Kim Mai Cutler, who was a journalist at the Asian American journalist at TechCrunch, and she was there for a short while and then went straight into venture capital. Like we were talking a little bit off record about the dip in like journalism jobs out there, and how what the lack of jobs in like traditional journalism has meant effectively is like all the people that wanted to go into those fields, a lot of them have ended up in business, have ended up in PR, marketing, and that's a different beast than traditional journalism. As many issues as I have with legacy media, I think it hasn't been a great decade for people seeking truth, and in part that has to do with now, a lot of the people that would have been writing at even the Chronicle, which I have issues with it, but the Chronicle's newsroom was probably double the size 10 years ago what it is now. But it's not all negatives. We have Bay Area Current, we have San Francisco. Like wondering if we could talk a little bit about some other options for people to get their news. I mean, like I think most people probably, I know most people get most of their news off of social media now. It feels like even that is like a contested, I guess it's always been a contested terrain, in that you are at the whims of algorithms created by corporations that are focused on making money. But there are alternative outlets, and now like things like Bay Area Current are sprouting up. I mean, even locally, like non-tech focused publications like Coyote is one that just came up. Soleil Ho has been on the podcast before, is one of the collective members there. Yeah. So I'm excited about some of these more homegrown outlets coming up that will hopefully, move into some of the gaps that were left by the great migration out of journalism and into PR. We talked about 404 Media.
Yeah, they're doing great work, especially around surveillance. So yeah, I think totally. The media landscape is awful. It's, but it doesn't have to be that way. I think there have been. You mentioned earlier Logic or Logic's magazine. That's the example that I use in the piece as a counterexample to all this. Logic was a magazine founded by a bunch of people, some of whom I knew from the tech workers movement in the 2010s. And it really captured the energy of the techlash and the politicization of many tech workers in a leftward direction, actually. And so I think it was an example of like a niche-ish publication media project that was tied to a social movement that was doing great work to both reflect that movement and feed into it. And I think that's what we have to do today. Projects like yours, San Francisco, 404, really great investigations. I'm more familiar with East Bay, so I think but I think the Bay Area recently there's been a mini renaissance of like small media projects and publications that are doing great work. Besides Bay Area Current, there's Coyote. Coyote's fantastic, as you mentioned. There's Oakland Review of Books, I'm a fan of. The Approach newspaper in the East Bay. I said the Phoenix Project here in SF. Well, they're Bay Area wide, but fantastic work on money and politics and City Hall and all that stuff. So the world is in a bad place. Politics is in a bad place, but there are some really exciting efforts going on the left.
I am hoping that continues. What else did I want to say? Like a couple other podcasts that I listen to. This Machine Kills. Tech Will Not Save Us. There's a couple other. I'll link in the show notes that are a lot more tech focused than this podcast, and they're not Bay Area based, but I think they might be of interest to people. I was wondering before I ask you to, let people know how to follow your work. Wondering if you've heard any news about. So we mentioned Stop AI, which is the group that has been protesting very consistently outside of like OpenAI and Anthropic, these two juggernauts in AI right now. Their concern in large part seems to be focused around the possibility of robots becoming our overlords, which I still am not quite sure. I'm there with them and thinking that that's even possible. But that said, they're also, of course, like coming for data centers, or coming for the energy that is used to power these data centers and the industry at large. We did an interview, or I did an interview with some of the people from Stop AI, like earlier this year, earlier in 2025. And I know that you all also covered Stop AI since Bay Area Current launch. Wondering if you've heard any news about Sam Kirchner, who is, a guy from Stop AI.
I only know what everyone else knows. I just heard that, he's been missing. You're right that we at Bay Area Current, my friend Victor wrote a nice piece that I edited on Stop AI. I think, like you, we were skeptical that about Stop AI's premise that AGI is coming very soon and that it's going to, wipe out humanity and that sort of thing. But I think we wrote sympathetically towards them because there's just so many other reasons, even if you don't believe in that one, to oppose the AI industry, whether it's environment, labor, just data centers being built, all that stuff. So there's that. But I haven't heard anything other than that. I hope he's all right. I hope everyone in Stop AI is all right as well.
I guess for those who don't know, like Sam Kirchner, one of the people that interviewed, is currently missing, has been missing since the end of November after a break with the group over tactics. So yeah, hopefully he is doing okay. And I'll try to keep people updated as I hear more. But bottom line, thank you for coming out to my friend's apartment in the Mission to record this. Where can people find Bay Area Currents? I mean, it will be linked in the show notes, but and more generally, follow your work.
Yeah, find Bay Area Currents at bayareacurrents.com. Follow us on socials. I think we do the most on Instagram, but yeah, you can find us in various places. I don't have a huge individual internet footprint, but if you just can read the tech section at Bay Area Currents, a lot of those pieces were I had a hand in editing them. I have other writings scattered over the internet, but if you want to reach me, just email editors@Bay Area Current and say that you wanted to reach me, and it will. But yeah, other than that, just like look out for our writings and follow all the great new left-wing media happening in the Bay Area, and also pitch us at Bay Area Current.
Thank you for listening to the show, and especially thank you to everyone who is contributing over at patreon.com/Sad Francisco. You're making it possible for Sad Francisco to exist. And if you're not already a member, think about joining. Again, it's patreon.com/Sad Francisco.